Distinguished guests, Kiwanians, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kiwanis Club of Kingsport's 2024 Candidate Forum. I'm MaryLee Davis, as President of Kiwanis and a member of the Civic and Business Affairs Committee, and it's my pleasure to serve today as your moderator. As Kiwanians, we have a strong commitment to civic responsibility and providing service to this community and indeed the world. As a reminder, Kiwanis is a global organization dedicating to improving the world one child and one community at a time. And this year, the Kiwanis Club of Kingsport is celebrating its 100th year anniversary of service to Kingsport and Kingsport's children and fulfilling our motto of serving the children of the world. The guidelines for today's forum are as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute to present an opening statement, 1 minute to respond to each of the forum questions, and finally, 1 minute for a closing statement. Our timekeeper, Admiral John McKinley, will provide each candidate with a 15-second alert. Thanks for sharing that, Admiral, as he has demonstrated to the candidates. We are delighted that 3 of the BMA candidates are with us today: Morris Baker, Julie Byers, and Darrell Duncan. The other candidate, James Phillips, was unable to join us as he had an out-of-state commitment that had been planned before we set this date. Candidates, we ask that you please use the microphone to provide your answers, and I know that takes a little sharing as well. And please speak directly into the microphone in order that everyone in the audience can hear your responses. We will start with the candidates' opening statements, beginning with Darrell Duncan, then Julie Byers, then Morris Baker.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't realize that I dressed so bad for our regular meeting until everybody said I cleaned up. So it's I do appreciate Kiwanis having this forum and being such a long history that we have in our community. I've got Sharon here with me today, and both of us have served our community for a number of years. We've been married for 44 years, and we've spent a big portion of that giving back to our community. The way I look at this election coming up, it's a very pivotal election for our city. We've got 4 people out of 7 that's running for office this time. We know we're going to have a new mayor. We're going to have at least 1 new alderman, could be 2, and even if one of the mayors gets, if one that's running goes in, we'll have to appoint someone. So we could have, potentially, we could have 3 new aldermen and a new mayor for this. So I hope that I am considered as having served our community very well over the past 7 years that I've been on the board. So please look at the experience that I've gained over the last 7 years, and I've always tried to just give back as best I could, and be served the way I want to be served.
Hello, my name is Julie Byers, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you all for hosting another forum, and I want to thank the Kiwanians who give your time back to our schools. Being a school board member for the past 5 years, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to read to our students. It is a need that is definitely well received and much needed, especially in the schools that you target. A lot of people say, well, you're not from around here, why are you running? Well, I'm running because Kingsport is my home. It is a place I've lived the longest. I moved here from Chicago after living in Ohio and Michigan for my formative years. I'm an Ohio State graduate. All 3 of my children were born and raised here. This is where our hearts are. All 3 of our kids enjoy coming back, and I would like to continue to show my passion back to Kingsport by being elected as alderman. Thank you for your support. Thank you for hosting us today.
Hello, I'm Morris Baker, and it's an honor to be here today at Kiwanis. I want to thank Kiwanis for hosting the candidate forum. As a lifelong resident of Kingsport, I take immense pride in our community. I graduated from Kingsport City Schools for one of my fondest memories was played in the 1984 Dobbins-Bennett Marching Band, where I played drums in the first Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade that the band did. After high school, I married my high school sweetheart. Then I chose to go after higher education. I earned a bachelor's degree in business administration from East Tennessee State, as well as a master's in public administration. I'm currently working on my doctorate from Liberty University. Angie and I chose to raise our family here in this region, and it's been a rewarding journey. Professionally, I've served 2 local governments. Most recently, I had 11 years with the city of Kingsport, where I reported to the city manager. And I would ask you to consider me as your vote in the August election. Thank you.
And we give our thanks to the candidates as well at this time. We will now begin our questioning, starting with Julie Byers. Julie, what is your vision of where Kingsport can be in 10 years? And how do you think you can be helpful in making that happen?
10 years is a long time, geez. My vision for Kingsport in 10 years is for us to continue to grow and foster. We've had significant change since COVID happened, and we had a lot of people moving in. I think we've had people from 49 states relocate to Kingsport, Tennessee. That has changed a little bit of the climate here and some of the personalities. Coming from the north, I really appreciate the Southern hospitality. I appreciate the Southern way of life. I appreciate that you don't get your horn blown because you sat at the light for 2 seconds. But anyway, I see as we're growing in Kingsport, I see us right now, we have the lowest median housing price. I would like to see that elevate. We're doing a great job building some communities. It's filling our schools. It's offering taxes, which help cover all of our expenses. I would also like us to continue to foster the medical system. Of course, we took a dip down, and I feel like we're second nature to Johnson City. And I know Ballot has done what they said they were going to do, but I would like to bring that back.
So I remember as a child growing up that there was immense civic pride in Kingsport. I can remember various aspects that adults would talk about, such as our healthcare system, such as our the paving of our roads, such as our school system, our well-funded police and fire department. I think there's 3 issues that I think if we focus on, we'll begin to get back to that civic pride. First is workforce development, and I think public schools is at the forefront of workforce development. The BMA does not oversee the school system. There's a publicly elected school board, but the BMA does provide funding for the school system. I think our schools need improvement for the quality education they deserve. I understand for the first time in Kingsport's history, we are no longer #1 in teacher pay in Sullivan County. If my numbers are correct, what I've been told is correct, we're 3rd. Second, I think we've got to continue to work on aging infrastructure. Poor quality roads leads to bad economic growth. I think we have to continue working on that. And lastly is economic diversification. I think we've got to look at other industries coming in to take the workforce we're going to train, we're going to develop and have a quality economic system.
A 10-year plan, I guess for me, I see the aerospace park at the airport being developed and built out in that area. Also, the city airport parkway, we've got a lot of development area that's potentially that we'll have more businesses and even some homes out there. We have builders looking at maybe putting almost 1,000 homes in that area. You know, with growth comes challenges, and so with that, I think we'll have to put a fire department out in that area. I see us having to have a new elementary school. I don't think that'll necessarily be a 10-year plan, but I think it'll be coming in the pipeline. We're going to kick off our dental clinic, and we'll probably be talking maybe a little bit more about that as we go along here. But I look for the dental clinic to turn into a full-blown school within 10 years, and that's a game changer for our city. I mean, you've got Memphis and you have Kingsport, but it's really a regional project. And then TCATS is growing, but we have a waiting list for TCATS, and so we need to build that out and see if they can get more available space that we'll offer to them through the North High School and to continue that educational part.
Thank you. For our second question, we will start with Mr. Duncan, Ms. Byers, and Mr. Baker. The question is, Outside of ongoing investments in paving and utilities, what do you believe are the top 3 capital improvements the city should accomplish in the next 5 years?
Well, from a capital improvement standpoint, I think that we have got some progress. We've got the Justice Center that's coming. And so that's will be built out here in just a little bit. We're doing improvements to the library, which we hope will start just very soon. But one of our fire stations, Station 2, is certainly going to have repairs. We've got for a safety standpoint, not only for our firemen, but for our citizens. We've got the drawings for that, and we're going to certainly take a close look at that. Housing is one of our biggest draws, and we lack good housing. And so we need developers to come in, and it's $25,000 per person per household. And so that's $75,000 for a family of 3 that lives here, and that is certainly an economic impact that you can never forget.
Economic expenditures for over the next 5 years. I do see some expenses going into Fire Station 2. Right now I understand that they're not even having safe drinking water there. Their equipment's outdated. How can we fend off hazards in our community if we don't even have an upstanding fire department in that area? I also see we're going to be spending some money on the Memorial Drive expansion. As we've been tearing down a lot of houses, those houses are not cheap to tear down. We've had to put in guardrails, and we are widening that road. And that is going to cost, even though it's state funded, it's also going to cost the city some money to make that a more viable road, and it's going to be very expensive. And quite frankly, as Mr. Duncan mentioned, we will be needing another school. We first thought we were going to need another middle school, and now it looks like we're going to need an elementary school. Some of our schools the average age of our schools is over 70 years. And so we're going to have to do something. It looks like a new school is going to be needed in the Kennedy and Roosevelt area, but that will be an expenditure for the city.
I think in 10 years, the top 3 first has to be public schools. I think we are going to have some public infrastructure that we're going to have to focus on with the school systems. Hopefully with growth, I think we have one of the oldest inventories of public education facilities in the Tri-Cities. Second, I think is our way of life areas, such as the senior center. We have I think the oldest demographic in our city is over 62, and I think a good senior center would help with that. I think a public library in Base Mountain, all of those funnel into quality of life. And then I think economic development with the academic village. A lot of energy went around the academic village in the late 2000s. And I believe there's some things that we can do there to help infuse workforce development, education. I think those 3 things will help us set the standard for Tennessee again.
Thank you, candidates. The next question will have the order of Mr. Baker, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Byers. With Eastman being a leader in plastics recycling and Domtar being a major player in cardboard recycling, what should Kingsport do to be a center of the circular economy?
So where I'm presently employed, Goodwill Industries, we are working nationwide, working with 4 other Goodwills we're going to be a hub in the southeastern region. We would receive textiles and then hopefully grade those textiles, pull out polyester, sell to Eastman, find other recycle end-of-life opportunities for those textiles. Domtar being the largest recycler in the state of Tennessee, and with Eastman Chemical right here, we have an awesome opportunity, I believe, to brand ourselves as a sustainable center of the U.S. I think when you have those type of synergies going on, it provides for clean tech jobs, it provides for good sustainable jobs, and I think we can actually backfill where we've lost manufacturing jobs with sustainability. So we're currently a supplier for Domtar, been working with them, and we're currently in talks with Eastman about being a supplier for their feedstock of textiles. So I'm very excited about that potential opportunity.
We stopped the recycling program really because of the cost that it was to our citizens. I think at the time everybody wants to be green, but it comes with a cost. And so when we stopped that, it was approaching over $800,000. And the company that was taking it to Knoxville and actually just putting it back and go to landfill. And so there's economic value to that, but it kind of crossed directions and where there just wasn't a cost value to it. For Eastman and Domtar, we had Domtar that spoke last week, and it looks like they'll take a broader range of recyclable material than probably what Eastman does. And Eastman needs a more of a sorting center, if you will, and so that makes it a little bit more difficult because we were wanting us to do the sorting center. We would love to do recyclable and be more involved. I know Food City is and other things as well, other places, and like Morris said, but you have to have, it's a cost value to see what the cost is to our citizens.
Thank you, candidates. And for question
Can I
4,
speak?
excuse me, Ms. Byers. Excuse me.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure.
She's shutting it before I even start. I believe with recycling, I think the Domtar program is actually phenomenal. I don't know if you've been around Domtar to understand. They're taking a lot of our cardboard. Some of the plastics that are in it is what they're stripping off, and that's how they're fueling their facility. Of course, once they switch to brown paper from the white paper, it has required a lot less chemicals. It's a lot better for our environment. And yes, they are working on the smell, but that's another topic another day. But Eastman is using the recycle, and they're taking the polyester to recycle and make more PET, polyester phthalate. So these are both areas that are very passionate to me. But Kingsport has not made recycling easy since COVID. And I think we also have an issue. People need to be educated on what is a recycle, what can they throw in there. No, they can't throw their whole can of beans in the plastic recycle. We don't want their plastic gum wrappers in the recycle. So I think we need to have some education, but we need to make recycling easier in Kingsport, and then we can help our 2 major industries.
And now for question 4. For now, for question 4, we will begin with Mr. Duncan, then Ms. Byers, then Mr. Baker. In earlier forums, it appeared that not all candidates may have understood the benefits to Kingsport if regional economic development is improved. What is your position on regional economic development, and what would you encourage to be done to have more quality results?
Well, I mentioned Aerospace Park, and that's probably one of the most regional focused areas of our city and really in our region. And so that is a cooperative effort between Kingsport, Johnson City, Sullivan County. And that is, hopefully we can get that grown soon. But that, it demonstrates as a regional effort. We have the hub and we have networks. Networks is in the paper yesterday where there's 450 jobs coming to the industrial park down there. The headquarters is going to be here in Kingsport of about 30 people. So regionally, it's a very competitive market. I mean, our tax structure is set up for Johnson City and Kingsport and Bristol to be very competitive. And so, you know, we certainly want to get all we can for the tax money that we have here in Kingsport, but we grow as a whole. There's no about it. So as the region grows, then we certainly will grow together. And so that's regionalism, I think, at its best.
Of course, I'm selfish, and I would love to see Kingsport have a lot more of the economic development. However, when you stop and you look at the region, we have people in working at Eastman that live in Johnson City and Bristol. We have people in Kingsport going to the casino in Bristol. Just because we may not have the business here, we can have the people here. And as long as people are in Kingsport, we are getting the expenditure from restaurants. Hopefully we can have more things like the International Underwater Robotics that put 1,100 heads in beds this weekend. And but I believe as long as the region is growing, Kingsport is benefiting from it. And while it's better for our tax base to have more, as there are some things that we have looked, and I know Eastman has positions in Johnson City, Domtar has some offices other places, but we all benefit from regional economic development. And the people are not, we're not living in a bubble. We all don't come to Kingsport, stay in Kingsport. We all don't live in Johnson City State. We're crossing all over the place, so it is a benefit for everybody.
So I lead an organization that serves 17 counties in the region. We go all the way to West Virginia and all the way down to North Carolina. I see regionalism every single day. I think the only parties that have not bought into regionalism is local governments. I think we know regionalism exists because we transpose county lines and city lines to go eat, to go shop, things of that nature. I think economic development is hard because tax dollars go with that. And I think economic development has to make sense for Kingsport where it comes to regionalism. I think one of the things we can do from a regional basis is make sure that we have good dialogue with local governments. We're talking amongst ourselves. We're finding out what opportunities do exist and where does it make sense for Kingsport to line up. Used to be Kingsport was set the standard for Tennessee with regards to economic development. We had 10 major industries that located here in the first 10 years of Kingsport's existence. I think we can fall back with that again, possibly through the clean tech, possibly through the sustainability initiative. We have opportunities there.
Thank you, candidates. For question 5, the order will be Mr. Baker, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Byers. While the mayors of Johnson City, Bristol, and Elizabethton have 2-year terms, they are elected by their fellow board members after having first been elected as board members for a 4-year term. What is your position on electing the mayor of Kingsport for a 4-year term as opposed to the current 2-year term?
You know, in Kingsport, when I worked for the city, it was confusing for citizens because the mayor was elected. And so many folks thought that the mayor was the chief executive officer of the city, and he's not. That's the city manager. My understanding of history of Kingsport, a referendum by the citizens said the mayor would be elected by citizens. I think we'd have to come back up for referendum. I think a 2-year term for a mayor can keep the mayor fresh. I think it can keep a vision there for the citizens. So I'm not opposed to keeping it a 2-year term right now. If we started talking about a 4-year term, I would advocate for a referendum. Since the citizens were the one that said we want an elected mayor, I would want them to be the ones that say we don't want an elected mayor.
This was a difficult vote, and one of the more difficult ones that I think we had in discussion while being on the board. It's an imbalance to me, to the board. It's easy, I think, if you just say you want the mayor to run or have a 4-year term, I think it's, systematically in your head, you think that. But for me, it's an imbalance to the board because we've got more focus on this election this year than what we normally would if it's just 3 aldermen. And so every 2 years, then you have aldermen that would just be running against herself and not the mayor. So I think it puts more focus when you have a mayor's race in there. That would be every 2 years. And also by midterm elections, I mean, you've got Mr. Montgomery and you've got Ms. George. If whichever one of those potentially wins, then they just come back as being an alderman. So it puts one group of aldermen that would never be able to do that. So it was a difficult decision on that, and but just for the imbalance to the board was the reason why I voted against.
A 2-year election for a 2-year term for a mayor seems like it's very short. However, standing back and watching Paul Montgomery and Colette George and all the effort they're putting in for this current mayoral race, they're both very passionate. That's a lot of time. So you would think maybe every 4 years would be a whole lot better. But it is directed back to the original question that the mayor is to be elected by the people. Is it elected and then is the mayor appointed like we do the school board and appoint the president each time or the mayor each time? I think that's harder. I think the candidates, the qualities of a mayor are a little bit different than that of just an alderman. They are the face of the city. So I do think 2 years is hard. I think it's brutal, but I also do think it keeps it fresh. I think it keeps all the aldermen a chance to see who their mayor is and work in different dynamics and keeping the city ongoing freshly.
Thank you, candidates. The order will be Ms. Byers, Mr. Baker, and Mr. Duncan. What makes you uniquely qualified to be one of the 7 board of mayor and alderman members at this time in Kingsport's history?
I'm just kind of unique by nature. Anyway, I don't know. There's 4 good people running for alderman. I'm just going to say that. But one thing I do appreciate about a board is that I think diversity on a board, different backgrounds, different thought process, different experience, everybody being a little bit different just makes a board stronger. It makes you step back and think differently. You can hear different perspectives. Your mind might be changed one way or the other. As a candidate, I have a little bit different perspective because, as I mentioned earlier, I am not born and raised here. I have lived in Ohio, I've lived in Michigan, I've lived in Chicago, I spent a year in the Philippines as an exchange student. I've traveled quite a bit, so I see different perspectives. I know what makes a city great, and I know what draws people to a tourist site because I am the tourist that goes someplace and I know what attracts them. So I think it's just that I have a little bit different perspective, and that just makes me a little bit unique. Oh, did I go the wrong way? Sorry.
So I'm running because I've got a background in city government. I've got a background in the faith community as well. I was on church staff for 34 years, and both of those require active listening to be successful. I've also got a background in working in community-based nonprofits, which have to be collaborate to remain true to missions to be successful. I believe I've got the energy, the enthusiasm, the experience, and the commitment to make a difference in our city. And as I've talked with citizens over the past few years, I've picked up that we've got a lack of a comprehensive civic pride. I'm running because I want to listen actively, I want to lead transparently, and I want to have bold leadership for Kingsport to dream big again. To again be the one that sets the standard for Tennessee. I'm currently working on a PhD in public administration with a focus on leadership and spirituality. I've learned leadership is about the vision thing. It's having the ability to bring people together. It requires bringing people along as well, and I believe that requires active listening, and I also believe it requires transparency. I've got experience with that. That's why I'm running.
It's been really an honor for me to serve our citizens of Kingsport for the last 7 years. And I've always tried to serve the way that I want to be served, but I also am available, approachable, and accessible. And so you can get a hold of me anytime, day or night. But we have a number of projects that's in the pipeline right now that I would like to see through. We have a dental clinic that I mentioned earlier. We've got 400 homes that's coming in downtown Kingsport, and there's not a city in the state that would like to have that opportunity to have 400 homes just right downtown. We also have an IMAX theater. For some of us in there, it may not mean that much to have IMAX theater, but it's the only theater that's IMAX theater within a 100-mile radius. And so we have outlying parcels at the mall that's being developed. We have a new park by Blue Cross and Blue Shield, a $7.8 million investment in our city that a company truly believes that the quality of life here in Kingsport is worth investing their money in. So I would truly, it would be an honor to serve and be reelected for the next 4 years.
Thank you, candidates. For the next question, the order will be Mr. Duncan, Ms. Byers, and Mr. Baker. The regional TDOT, Tennessee Department of Transportation, officials recently provided an update on the major projects in our region that are outlined in their 10-year plan. Kingsport currently has 2 road projects in the TDOT 10-year plan. These projects have been on the books for over 30 years, ladies and gentlemen. State Route 126, Memorial Boulevard, is an 8-mile stretch, 2 miles of which are ready to go and should be finished in 2 years. State Route 93, Fall Branch, is soon to be finished after 35 years. What should Kingsport be doing to get more support from TDOT?
Well, I don't think anybody will disagree that TDOT is like needing the road and push the road. And so it is a slow progress because there's just so many other roads, especially in our larger cities right now, that's vying for the same dollar as we are. So you get the name on the list and, you know, it's whether it's moved up or moved down or it stays in the same place. We have, through our city staff, people that monitors that just almost all the time. Michael Thompson, that's what part of what his job does. He's a city engineer that tries to to push those jobs and make them even quicker. But at some point, you have to fall into your legislators. And so whether that's the state senator or whether it's our representatives, we have David Hawk here a lot. We pull on his ear for a number of things, but it's a legislative issue, there's no doubt. And it's hard for the city. We push as hard as we can, but sometimes you just need help above what you've got.
TDOT is hard because it is the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and sometimes Northeast Tennessee gets forgotten when we start talking about Nashville. So the best way to push TDOT and focusing in our areas is to make sure that we as a BMA are communicating our needs from a community back to our representatives, whether the Senate or the House of Representatives, and let them help us carry and lobby in Nashville. I don't know enough about Tennessee Department of Transportation. I just know that they are slow. They have lots of projects. They have a big budget. But trying to understand where it needs to go, we as a BMA need to make sure that we prioritize what our needs are, explain the value of it, get it back into our representatives' hands and let them lobby and make sure that we keep following up with them and we can needle them so they can needle TDOT.
So I would pull from my grant writing days when I was at the city of Kingsport. You know, I learned in grant writing that the writing of it is probably 15% of the success. Relationships and collaboration was the other 85%. The first thing I would do is say, let's make sure we know what our priorities are. Secondly of all, I would have relationships. And let's get in the car, let's go down to Nashville. I learned with the fun grant writing that sometimes you don't get what you need because the folks have not went down politically and asked for it. Sometimes that just needs to occur. So I would encourage my fellow DMA members to let's prioritize what we need to have. As far as funding, let's get in the car, let's go down to TDOT with the delegation, let's have ongoing dialogue. So ask TDOT, how can we help you be successful as well? You know, one of the things I believe that we don't have in the city, I could be in an era, is an in-house paving crew. And I think Sullivan County has an in-house paving crew and paved 35 miles of roadway last year. We can help further that along some. But I don't buy that it's a state funded road, so we can't do anything about it. I believe we can have dialogue with TDOT to figure out what we can do.
Thank you, candidates. For this question, the order will be Mr. Baker, Mr. Duncan, and then Ms. Byers. In the city manager's recent budget presentation, he discussed the need to develop a new strategic plan in fiscal year 25. This would be the first major overhaul of the plan in over a decade. If elected, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities of that plan?
So I think it's great the city's going to do that. I think that's cast the vision for citizens to know what that is as well. So I would go back again to make sure we have a 20-year repaving plan, make sure we have paving as a priority. What can we do to help expedite that to get paving? I believe if we have our roads paved, I think it increases city pride within the citizens of Kingsport. I think secondly is workforce development. I think we have to be looking at how do we make sure that our workforce is trained in Kingsport. I mentioned the 10 industries that came to Kingsport in the first 10 years of Kingsport's existence. The natural resources is what those industrial leaders said was the reason they came here. Water, coal, and the people. People are still here. And I think to improve our city, we have to have good quality jobs. So I think that has to be there. I think we've got to look at our infrastructure as well. When I say infrastructure, I'm talking about city services from top to bottom. Most time when cities add a service, it never gets taken back off. And I think we have to be looking at that from an efficiency standpoint so we don't raise taxes if it's not needed. That 15 seconds comes along very, very quickly. And I talk fast.
We do have to reinforce our education, and especially in our workforce with TCATs and RCAM. RCAM, you know, is our works for our industrial providers, and so that is an educated workforce for our industry is super important. And TCATs, which I mentioned earlier, TCATs is for hands-on, whether it's heat pumps and plumbers and electricians. There's room to expand. We've got 800 people on a waiting list up there. That should just not happen. We do need to increase our paving, but you got to have funding for that. We're paying $10.8 million. We're spending that much this year on a paving program, but we probably will need to adjust our franchise fee at some point, which is a sustainable funding plan for that. And then finally, I think we do have a strategic plan each year, but going into 2025, I think we'll look more closely at schools and certainly whether we'll need elementary school or not. So we have a lot of things on the plate this time.
I was very excited to see that we are developing a brand new strategic plan. I think it's needed. Where do we see Kingsport in the future? Where do we see ourselves? How do we want to brand Kingsport? Is it as a retirement community? Is it for our youth? How do we want to rebrand? So having a strategic plan is key for that. One of the ways we need to start is in the housing market. Where do we want to see ourselves in the housing market? I also think education is a big one. I'm very passionate with our education system, but I think we can use what Dobbins-Bennett is doing with their career technology and do more with the work-based learning. But I think we need to talk to our community partners and figure out where the gaps are. What does our community need, and where do they see that their gaps are? And that's what we need to put into that strategic plan, is we can't do it in a bubble by ourselves. The community needs to have the input. We need to be out in the community figuring out from our business partners, from our school partners, and from our citizens where our gaps are.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question will be in the order of Ms. Byers, Mr. Baker, and Mr. Duncan. Kingsport has recently made investments in economic development projects through various incentives, such as TIFs, pilots, and in some cases, cash contributions. Do you support the continued use of incentives? Why or why not?
This goes perfectly with the strategic plan. What do we want as far as economic development here? I think we need to be very strategic in figuring out where we want to spend those dollars. Yes, I believe in offering some incentives or TIFs to attract the right businesses or to let local businesses expand. I think economic development is an area of top focus in Kingsport. But I don't think we need to be offering incentives for every willy-nilly business to come here. I think we need to be strategic in who we incent. And now's the time, as we're doing the strategic plan, what do we want to be? Do we want to restart a culinary school here and then entice some of the restaurants to use those chefs, create a whole new area? Is it something more along we're not going to have another Eastman or another Domtar, but what can we have along that line? What can we have small local businesses that we can incent? So yes, I am into offering incentives if it's strategically appropriate.
I heard somebody equate economic incentives to like standing up at a football game. If somebody's right in front of you standing up and nobody else is standing up, that's awkward. But if the whole stadium is standing up, it's a pretty exciting thing. And I think economic development incentives are powerful tools when they're used strategically and responsibly. I think you've got to apply rigorous standards and accountability measures. And I think it's so important to make sure that on the Kingsport Economic Development Board, we have the folks who have the expertise that can help assess financials, can help assess strategic plans, and understand exactly if the company has been successful in the past. Let's look at where they have been if they're going to come here. I think economic development tools are entrepreneurial for a second. To be able to lay out and say, we want to have this type of industry, that's great if we can get that, but there are times industries may just show up at your doorstep. You got to be willing to do that. So I think due diligence is crucial in screening applicants, and the vetting, I think, only ensures the most valuable projects receive support. So yes, I am in favor of it where it makes sense.
TIFs, pilots, and material grants it's a competitive advantage that you have to try to get development. But in each case, each one of them is very much different. And so you have to look and see what the economic value is to your city. A good example is the old Walmart site up on Stone Drive. That is, it was a blighted area. It hadn't had anything built there or even touched in 18 years. There was TIF money went to that. Now there's 90 plus homes up there with 90 families living there. It's never free money, and each one is different. It has to be looked at very, very closely. So yes, we use that as a competitive advantage, and I think that I'm glad we've got it. Also, the material grants for When people puts in subdivision and you reimburse them back, but it's certainly a competitive tool that we have.
Thank you, candidates. In the order for the next question, Mr. Duncan, Ms. Byers, and Mr. Baker. Since the BMA and the Board of Education have recently agreed that we do need to look at our elementary school buildings in the near future, what would you emphasize to ensure that locations are the most strategic for both current neighborhood needs and for long-term usage for growth? Since school buildings are 70 to 80-year investments, and secondly, do you agree with the proposal since it's probably going to cost us over $40 million?
Well, it does have to be looked at very closely. We need to look at the population of our schools. Our schools actually dropped over 200 students this past year, and we're very good at predicting that through our Board of Education. But it was a decline in our student population, so that has to be looked at very close. We do have aging schools in our systems, and so it's how much you want to reinvest in an old school or potentially combine a couple of schools. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at, to potentially have a new school in the Lynn Garden area. We're looking at economic development in the Lynn Garden area, and certainly a school taken out of that area, I think would be a very adverse condition for Lynn Garden. And so I think that area certainly could support a new school if we shut down the two existing schools that's there. And you do have to look very closely at the neighborhoods that well, but 40 million would probably be a very minimum. I'd say we're looking probably closer to 60 the way inflation is.
The school discussion has not been one that has gone over lightly. We've had several projects done from the Board of Education side to see where our growth is. As I'm sure you all fondly remember, just 2 years ago, we were talking about making Sullivan North of Middle School and making Severn Elementary School. We canned that idea because we realized that's not necessarily what we needed. But we looked at where Roosevelt and Kennedy are. There is a strong community around both of those schools. Moving a school out of a community is very hard, it's very detrimental. But both those schools are both underutilized and they're both in really pretty bad shape. We spend a lot of money to try to modernize those schools or to keep them. For those of you that read at Kennedy, you know it's cold in the wintertime because there's no heat in the hallway. So it is time. I mean, it's hard for a kid to learn if they're uncomfortable. It's hard for a teacher to teach if they're uncomfortable. So I do think we need a new school. I think the decision will not be made lightly, and it is something we have to look at our investments.
I hope that schools and public education can be one of the greatest economic drivers for a city. I think it can be something that can drive community growth as well. If you have a top-notch school, folks begin to look in the region and they have kids, and then you've got families moving in. It's kind of like when I was a youth minister. I had a fellow tell me a church that doesn't have a youth ministry is a dying church. Community does not have families moving in. You're maybe a dying community. So what I would recommend doing with the strategic plan coming up, you can't just put a school as a one-off. It has to be in the strategic plan for the city. What else is the city going to provide in that community to help infuse, to help develop, to help grow, whatever we need to do to make sure it's successful? I do think that we have one of the lowest or one of the oldest inventories of public schools that we can in the Tri-Cities. So I'm not going to be opposed to looking at new schools. I think, again, it can be a huge economic driver if we have the right schools and we have a good school system.
Thank you, candidates. The order for the next question will be Mr. Baker, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Byers. Most people understand that the key to successful learning is for children to achieve at least a third grade reading level on schedule. What would you suggest the schools and our public library do together to maximize the integration of these public resources to facilitate the year-long continual learning for our children?
So when I worked for the city before, the library was in my department. And it was frustrating because I would see other communities that would take the library and they was a community gathering place. I think about the third grade TCAP. My granddaughter was a third grader not this past year, but year before. She sweated so much about passing that because she didn't want to be held back. So I'm torn with that, but I think we have to make sure that the community is, what can we do as a community to make sure that we're supporting families, we're supporting education, we're supporting students. I think the library and the school system could partner, and I think we could continue to have programs in the library if we have the right facility that will allow students to continue that lifelong learning. I remember when the Harry Potter series came out, it infused reading for students. And I think we've got to have something that students, they actively get involved. I didn't like to read when I was in school. I had to learn to read. And now I'm an avid reader because I learned that readers lead and leaders read. So we've got to instill that with our kids. I think our library can be a major part of that.
You know, I think it's easy to look back at some of the libraries that many of us look back at. It's not a Dewey Decimal System anymore. It is a highly technologically adaptive learning tool that we have. And the Board of Education, we have a wonderful Board of Education. I think they play a very big part in this as well. We're ready to spend close to $7 million on expanding our library. And we're getting ready to, that will probably happen in the early part of 2025. There's a lot to that because you've got to move everything out for some expansion. So it certainly is a educational tool that will certainly be ready, once it is ready, to be certainly in coordination with our school system for sure. So I think that we're at least on track for that.
Roughly 90% of our prisoners cannot read at a 4th grade level. It is imperative that our children know how to read. I think the 3rd grade retention law was done a little bit quirky. You were testing a group of students that was their first normal year of school. Their first year in kindergarten was cut short because of COVID. The 2nd year, a lot of them were not in class. The 3rd year, people were still wearing masks. First normal year. And then you have a lot of children who don't do well on standardized tests. There are a lot of adults who don't do well on standardized tests. So I think the 3rd grade retention law was a little bit quirky anyway. It was one data point, one day in time. I am a firm believer that our children need to read. The school system has done a great job in offering summer programming, but I think the library, the problem is you have to get the kid there. They have summer reading programs today. They have summer camps today. With the expansion, we can expand on that, but we need to figure out a way to get our students that are struggling in reading to the library to enhance it.
Thank you. Our next question is Ms. Byers, Ms. Baker, and Ms. Duncan. While Kingsport participates in several economic development organizations, there have not been many new quality jobs, that is, above the median income, created. Nor have there been any new businesses locating here to take advantage of the raw materials that are produced here. What do you think we need to do to ensure that we will have future success with job creation and new business?
When the strategic plan is done, we're going to know who we need to target. We all know we need to have more economic development and growth in the area. We do have a lot of small businesses, and a lot of them are not able to initially out of the gate pay high wages. And especially with the cost of living increasing and the minimum wage, not even though it's official, doubling at your local, your barista's making a lot more than even your medical assistant today. So there are some issues on how we have to attract businesses. We need to look at what is in our area. We have a lot of beautiful natural resources. Maybe we're looking at it a little bit wrong. Maybe we could do something like the Carolina Whitewater Center, which brings in jobs, it pays well, and it also brings in a lot of visitors. So we just need to look at the strategic plan, look at our resources, and look at what our schools can offer, especially our high school students that are graduating with certifications. Maybe those are some of the companies that we can target.
So we currently have the highest child poverty in the region. We're at 35% of our children who live in poverty. When I say poverty, I'm not talking low income. I'm talking the most abject, backbreaking lifestyle that a child could be in. This past year, it was reported that we had 65% increase in homelessness. Our reported crime in Kingsport is 35% higher than Johnson City. When businesses look to locate to an area, those are things that they look at, in addition to they look at our school system. So in my mind, if we focus on those type of initiatives, and we focus on those areas, and that doesn't mean the city has to put money into it. I don't want to put money into it. We become a magnet for the homeless, but I think we have to begin to look at it. We've got some significant issues that we're no longer considered the model city. And when we was setting standards for Tennessee, it was those type of areas that we were looking at. So I think we could look at that. I think we've got to focus on workforce development. I think, again, if we have a trained workforce, if we have a workforce with the propensity to learn, I think an industry may be closer to come to Kingsport than another area of the region.
Reporting of crime is just a little bit different in Johnson City what it is here in Kingsport, so I think you always have to kind of look at that, just to kind of expand on that. But in 2020, we hired an economic development director just to look for businesses that wish to relocate in our city, and so that has been very productive. They get calls almost every single day for people that might be relocating their business. Not all the time that they pans out, but certainly we've got somebody to help them to provide either land or for a building. Our largest employer is not Eastman or Domtar. Our largest employer here in the Tri-Cities is small businesses. And so that's what is the economic driver of our city. So we certainly have to go after our small business, and we cannot forget those as well. We just changed the economic development director here just not too long ago with John Rose, but John Rose went to the hub, and then we've got networks to look at more regional basis too. So we have the system in place. It's just you've got to have developers or businesses to come.
Thank you. Our next order will be Mr. Duncan, Ms. Byers, and Mr. Baker. The Tennessee General Assembly required local school board members to be elected on a partisan basis, which came with resistance from local school boards. Do you think that school board members should be elected on a nonpartisan basis? And do you feel the BMA elections should continue on a nonpartisan basis?
Well, I think it certainly ought to be nonpartisan. I mean, to me, the development of our city and the growth of our city should not be party driven. And so whether it's the Board of Education or whether it's through the BMA, I think that the goals should be to drive our city forward. And so I just don't see that as being party related if your heart is in the city and the citizens of our city. And that's the same thing that goes with the Board of Education. It would be hard for me to support that. I didn't know that was even coming up for election. And it seemed like that the legislators kind of just put that in place. When it comes time for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the city councils across the city, through TML, which I'm a District 1 director of, I mean, it was fought very hard to try to keep it nonpartisan, and it was very successful with that. No one I've seen across the state really wants that.
This is a sore subject. I do believe that the school boards should be nonpartisan. I do believe how it came through was kind of squirrely. Nashville thought it'd be a great idea. And then locally it was voted on that the school boards would be a partisan election. It is now being fought to turn that over. The school boards, politics don't belong in schools. Your number one issue is those children and what is best for those kids in order to make them successful, and a party shouldn't dictate what makes a child successful. As far as the BMA, I like it being nonpartisan. I think it brings in different perspectives already, and I think, as Mr. Duncan said, if you are nonpartisan and you're running for your own passion and what is best for the community. So I really hope the school board does get turned back to being a nonpartisan election, and I would like to see the BMA remain nonpartisan.
Somebody said all politics is local. I think education is a local issue. I don't think Nashville, I don't think the federal government. I think the local school board should be the one that focuses on the local education. No, it should not be partisan. I think that politics should not be in that. If you just look at our society today, if you watch last night, We are a divided country in a major way. Our children does not deserve dividedness. Our children should have the best of a community, which means we take from both sides and we make it the best particular issue. We debate the issue. I also don't believe that the BMA should be a partisan election either. I think that's one of the last bastions where politics can stay out of it, and we can focus on truly what the major issue is, what the right issue is, and we don't worry about what the party says the issue should be. So that's where I am with that.
Thank you. Our next question will be the order of Mr. Baker, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Byers. Recently, there has been much discussion about term limits for elected officials. How do you feel about term limits for local elected officials in the city and in the county?
Well, I think we have term limits. We have a term limit coming up in August. You have the opportunity to vote. I think that's where term limits should be, and you know, I think we have such voter apathy today. I think it's important to have events like this to engage citizens, to talk about what the issues are. It's hard when you have a 1-minute response you got to give, and you can't really talk about the issues at hand in a debate type manner. Yeah, that's kind of where I am.
I don't think it should be term limits either, especially for local elections. So it might be a little bit different for the federal level, but certainly on the local level, I know we do have elections that if you don't perform and if somebody feels like that I haven't done the best of my ability and I've made bad decisions that doesn't represent the citizens of Kingsport, then the expectation for me is that I would probably not be reelected. And so I certainly think the term limits will certainly filter themselves out if you're not performing for sure.
I think it's hard enough to get local people to want to run for an office, whether it's BOE, whether it's BMA, you name it. It's really hard to get good people running. So I'm not in favor of term limits for our local election. Federal level is a different story, and maybe it's not a term limit, maybe more of an age limit. You start seeing some of the people in DC just kind of question, but we put them there. We vote, we put them there. And same thing, I mean, if you're not good, you shouldn't be voted in. Sadly, a lot of our population doesn't take the time to know who the candidates are. They don't take the time to understand what the issues are or what the candidate's stance is. And I think that is critical. We need people to be more involved with the election. We need more people in the community wanting to run for various positions, but let's not isolate it more by putting in term limits.
Our next question, the order would be Mr. Duncan, Ms. Byers, and Mr. Morris. How would you work to achieve better cooperation with the city and the county commission on major projects and ensure that you are working together to achieve the most cost-effective continuing services where possible?
Well, I think we have, at least for the commissioners that represents Kingsport, I think I have a very good relationship with. And but on the other side of that is, I don't think anybody in this room disagrees. There's probably not too many of them. It's hard to make a decision with having 23. We have had meetings, joint meetings that was set up. The last one I don't think come to attrition, but with our city and county, BMA and commissioners set up to just to build let them show what our needs are versus what their needs are as well. Sometimes I think that the county commission forgets that the Kingsport City residents are county paying residents as well. And so you have to reinforce that occasionally, which I don't think that we should. We pay county taxes as well, and we should have a voice. We're also the hub of the county. You take the city out of that, and there is no tax money left for the county. So we should have a better speaking voice at the table, probably at some time.
I do believe some of the Sullivan County commissioners believe that Kingsport is some awful beast. They treat us like we're a fort that needs to be penetrated. We are part of Sullivan County. Because Kingsport is part of Sullivan County, we need to work together with the commissioners And I do think there's too many commissioners, but that's another conversation another day as well. But I do think we need to have working relations. I do know that there are joint meetings between the county commissioners and the Kingsport BMA, but we are all part of Sullivan County. We still need to look at Kingsport first because we're the almighty Kingsport, but Sullivan County can't treat us like we are the Eagles' stepchildren. And I think working together, I think having the joint meetings that we have are a step in the right direction. We need to keep fostering those relationships because we are one. At the end of the day, we are Sullivan County, and we are just the center and the most important part of Sullivan County.
I had grandparents that lived on Robertson Street down in Gibsontown, and they had land that they actually put a garden out. As grandkids, there were 17 of us. We all had a section of that garden that we had. Can't wait till the issue arises to begin to cultivate the relationship. I think we have to have ongoing, active relationships, just like that garden, trying to cultivate that, so we both know what do you need to succeed and what do we need to succeed. As Darrell said, we're part of Sullivan County. Sullivan County is part of us. So I think it comes down to relationships. I really love the idea of the joint meetings between the county commission and the BMA. I think that is so critical. But I think we should also be talking to Bristol, Johnson City, Hawkins County Commission. Understand that we're part of the entire region.
Thank you. Candidates, at this time, we invite your closing statements. We will begin with Morris Baker, followed by Julie Byers, and then Darrell Duncan.
Well, first, I want to thank the Kiwanis again for hosting the candidate forum. I think I can sit here and say I'm not a candidate seeking your support. I'm a lifelong resident, I'm a neighbor, and I'm a friend who shares the joys and concerns of our town. I believe I've got the energy, the enthusiasm, the experience, the commitment to make a difference in our city. And I want to actively listen, I want to lead transparently, and I want to provide bold leadership, allowing Kingsport to dream big again, and for us to once again be the one that sets the standard for the state of Tennessee. The civic pride I've seen in our town over the years, in my 56 years in Kingsport, is something I want to help reinvigorate. And I believe I have the leadership to help make that happen. With that, I ask you for your vote, and thank you for the opportunity to answer questions today.
Thank you much. Thank you very much for all of you for staying here and listening to lots and lots of questions. And it's really funny. You have a minute, you think, oh, that's plenty of time. So you start talking and your brain's going, really fast and your mouth's not communicating quite that quickly. But anyway, it's been a great day for me to hear the different answers, but I do appreciate the Kiwanis for putting this on. I believe that I have great leadership. Many of you know me. What I am is what I am. I mean, what you see is what you get. So I appreciate your vote starting in July, but August 1st is when it really matters. And I will lead you. I will listen. I am available, but as I was told, I have 2 years to listen twice as much as I talk, and I really believe that. And I have high credibility. So if you tell me something in confidence, it's going to stay. That's just kind of how I am. But appreciate everybody today and for your diligence, and I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope I can get your vote.
We have more similarities up here probably than what we have differences. And so I've known Morris for a long time. We've been on committees together when he worked for the city. For Julie, I served on her daughter's Eagle Scout board there, and her daughter made Eagle Scout. And for James, who's not here, but James and I have worked closely together for the last 5 years. And so when you look at it, and you've got great people that's willing to run, then take notice to the experience. 7 years of being on the board. It's not as quick a learning curve. There's a large learning curve for being on the board. You get a lot of information quick. But hopefully I've represented Kingsport the way that you want to be represented. And so I appreciate the opportunity that I've had for 7 years, and I hope to do it for another 4. Sharon and I will be up front here in a few minutes, and so I hope everyone can just drop by and say hello. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give our candidates a warm Kiwanis thank you.